Hey everyone, what's up? It's Alex here from VG247.com, and I'm here with my final thoughts, or at least final thoughts for now, on the Halo Infinite campaign, the, for now at least, single-player segment of the game. Obviously, the multiplayer has sort of been in this beta state out for everyone for a little while now, but I've been lucky enough to be playing the nearly final version of the single-player campaign, and I wanted to talk to you about it. All the video I'm going to show here is from side content, from side activities, and that way we avoid any chance of any story spoilers sneaking into this video. So it's all just tooling around the open world. And let's start by talking about that, right? Like, Halo Infinite has this one barnstorming new feature, and that's the fact that it's technically an open world game. And that's obviously stolen all the headlines, because that's a big deal for Halo. But the truth about Halo Infinite is, it's less of a revolution than you might think. In fact, it's more of an evolution. Now, that's not a bad thing. Infinite feels like, I think, a coming of age for 343 Industries, the developer that Microsoft created with the sole task of looking after Halo. And I think it's fair to say that 343 has struggled to step out of the shadow of Bungie, Halo's creators. And Infinite feels like it's an answer to that almost. It feels introspective. It feels like it examines the Halo series, the whole series, and then works to reuse, reference, and refine all of the elements of the series to make a new generation Halo game. In many ways, it feels quite appropriately cyclical. Like, obviously, Halo is a ring, and the game at large sort of it works to bring the entire series full circle. And that doesn't just involve bringing it back to the original game, but it also includes touching base on everything else that's come out since then. For the open world, for instance, I think it owes less to all the other open world games and more to the Silent Cartographer, that probably the best level in the original Halo game. You know, that's an archetypal Halo experience, right? You start out on a beach with a Warthog vehicle and Marines. You use the vehicle to tear through these semi-open environments. You reach an installation, you go into the installation, and you enter and explore, and then obviously that is more claustrophobic and closed in. That's the structure of Halo Infinite at large. It's just, rather than just that being one mission, it's the whole game within that framework. In that sense, Halo 3 ODST also comes to mind, because obviously that was the game where you stalked across a city at night, and that was like open-ended. You can tackle the missions in any order, and you'd find items that would then throw you into a flashback of an actual mission. And so that sort of feels a little bit referenced here too, in the sense that you're traveling the open world, but sometimes you'll reach a location and it'll literally be like, press X to start a story mission, or you enter a building and then there's a loading zone, and then it's a more linear, traditional Halo mission. Now, the core story unfolds across a series of stages that you undertake in a set order, so it's not like it's non-linear in that sense, but there is non-linearity then in the side content. You know, you've got activities and exploration you can do in between the campaign missions. This involves stuff like you can destroy enemy installations, you can assassinate their notable generals and leaders, and you're generally working to basically undermine the Banished, the current enemy faction in the Halo universe, across the Zeta Halo ring, which is this Halo ring in this game. And it's all combat focused, so this isn't any other type of open world. You know, the Master Chief isn't going to take his buddies bowling, or you're not going to be doing Warthog races across the map. But you can kill Banished in a variety of wonderful ways, and you have the ability to approach these encounters however you want. It's really to the credit of Halo Infinite's combat design that this is an open world where you really do precisely one thing, which is fight, and yet it all lands perfectly and you never get bored of it. Now, that's just because this combat feels brilliant, and it's difficult to describe why it feels so brilliant. But what I'll say is, it's classic Halo, but it's not just the same old Halo. Like, the new equipment options they've got, which of course is headed up by the grappling hook, the grapple shot, they really open things up significantly. The world itself does a fair amount of legwork on this too, like all the side activities that take place out there. Many of them you can approach in any way you want, because they're just dropped into the middle of an open world, the compound or area where enemies are holed up. You can approach it from any direction, so you can snipe from afar, or you can go and get a vehicle and try to cheese it, or you can, you know, try and take it from the air with an aerial vehicle, or you could just go in all guns blazing. The weapons and equipment, which benefit, I think, from the expansion that 343 has done to the Halo universe since Halo 4, because you've got more different options, more types of weapon, a lot of stuff returns from those later games. It means that every encounter does feel a little bit different, even if you're repeating doing essentially the same tasks. Now, the story missions are a more traditional affair on the whole. Some take place in the open world. There's one brilliant string where you need to take down a series of stations that are spread huge distances apart, where if you can get your hands on an aerial vehicle, you'll be much better off in that mission. But many of them are typical Halo missions that you simply head to a location of the world, start the mission, and you play that mission A to B to C to D to the end of the mission. Some of these missions take you like going deep into buildings for really contained, carefully designed encounters, and others are sort of more wide open. How you travel between them, though, is up to you. So, in a sense of scale, this is the biggest Halo yet, but in many ways, the bombast of some of those best story missions feels the most reminiscent of Halo 3, which I consider personally to be the high watermark of Halo campaigns. The end result, I think, is that there's something here for everyone. So if you're a traditional Halo fan and the non-linear elements just don't work for you, you can simply just travel straight to the next story waypoint every time, and it will usher you from one level to the next. And that makes for a decent facsimile of the structure of the old games. You just have to do a little bit of walking between missions. And there are some missions that are deliberately open-ended, but I think taken alone, they don't materially feel any different from the more free-form levels of the past Halo games, like the Silent Cartographer. Now, early on, I mentioned that Halo Infinite takes inspiration from practically the whole series, but I only name-checked a couple of the games, so let's briefly just talk about the rest. Like, the way in which the equipment settles into the rhythm of the game, I think feels more like Halo Reach. The way the UNSC presence on the ring ramps up as you take over bases isn't a direct reference to any specific game, but for me also, I can't help but feel echoes of the grander scale of the RTS games of Halo Wars in that. And deceptively heavy in its influence over this game are the other two games that 343 made, Halo 4 and Halo 5. These games aren't as massively beloved as the Bungie trilogy, but Infinite has really given me a newfound appreciation for what they accomplished with both those games. As I mentioned earlier, Infinite's got a wider variety of weapons, of enemies, of aesthetics, and a narrative with surprising impacts, and much of that is owed to the groundwork laid by the previous two games, but it's presented in such a way where you don't need to have actually played them. The joke is that Master Chief is a non-character, right? He kills the aliens and doesn't afraid of anything, as the old meme goes, but he's not really just that anymore, you know? He is a character. He has relationships, feelings. In Halo Infinite, he's quite often quite funny, and even more often is genuinely conflicted about what's going on around him. Now, this is largely accomplished through incredibly broad but surprisingly subtle body language, because of course you never see his face, and also the great voiceover performances by Steve Downes, who plays Master Chief, and Jen Taylor, who plays Cortana and some other characters. That pair is the heart of this franchise, I think, and what they've accomplished with these roles is underpraised. I think we always talk about the people who do big performance capture acting and stuff like that, but these two are bread and butter voice actors putting in great work. And, you know, playing a machine and an emotion-blocking cog in the military machine, the two of them really instill the series with a strong sense of humanity. The narrative is perhaps one of the most significant reasons to play Halo Infinite, at least the campaign, of course. After all, you know, all those core mechanics, as brilliant as they are, they're all available for free in the multiplayer. But the narrative was one of the biggest surprises for me, as I found it really effective and engaging. In fact, my interest in the Halo lore has taken something of a nosedive in recent years. I've gone from the sort of person who reads the books to the sort of person who can barely even remember what happened in Halo 5. But Infinite drew me in early, and it really kept my interest. Perhaps most interestingly, I think it's a game that actually thematically has stuff to say. So, buried beneath the explosive battles, there's a story about betrayal and learning to trust again. There's a story that also, I think, probably resonates deeply with the developers about it being okay to leave elements of the past behind, while also acknowledging that some parts of the past are too sacred to jettison. And it's in this way I think Infinite feels like 343 stepping into its role properly as the custodian of Halo with confidence. Like, The game is great in its own right, but it's also an effective mission statement in terms of play and narrative alike about what the future of this series is, and that's a big deal because this is still Xbox's flagship. So, I mean, all told, I think you can tell I'm pretty gushing. I love it. There are elements that aren't quite as praiseworthy, of course. Halo Infinite has proper boss fights, like named enemies with health bars that must be gradually whittled down. These are extremely hit or miss. Some of these battles were genuinely thrilling, while others fall rather flat. Enemies that have been quietly hyped up in the pre-release ultimately aren't in the game that much, but each does get a memorable battle. Some are just memorable for the wrong reasons. As I prepare to jump into a legendary difficulty run, I dread having to face off with a powerful brute who has a large health bar and spends half his battle in a relatively tight arena charging at you with a powered up gravity hammer. There's also the visual stuff, of course. Now, my preview of the game upset some fans because I said, and I quote myself, that Infinite, quote, looks like a glorified Xbox One game, unquote. And people said, of course it does, it is an Xbox One game. And you're right, but look, the point is that there's different sorts of cross-generation games. So the examples I gave was there's Forza Horizon 5, that's a cross-gen game, but a wonderful Xbox Series X and S showcase. You know, if you jump to the other side, Spider-Man Miles Morales was a cross-generation title, but it was a great showcase of the PS5's ray tracing abilities and just in which ways it was better than the PS4. Halo Infinite isn't really that. What you get on the new machines is higher resolution without a frame rate hit rather than a visual showcase. With that said, Infinite does look nice during occasional moments, like sometimes looking out over certain vistas from extreme distance, or when cutscenes ogle Master Chief's armor in extreme close-up, it looks really nice. Other times I really wish they'd pull the camera back a bit, like in multiple scenes where a villain delivers monologues via hologram, and the tightness of the camera, it draws right into his face, and they've got way more confidence, whoever directed that cutscene, in that character model than I do, because I think the tightness of the camera shot really exposes the deficiencies in the model and the animation, which probably comes from this being a cross-gen game. And sometimes the long distance stuff doesn't even work. Like sometimes it feels like the distance detail is somewhat lacking across Zeta Halo. Some vistas are beautiful and some of them you sort of go, the world's just sort of falling into nothing in that little distance. It's all fine. I want to be clear, it's all fine. But taken as a AAA flagship of a game, one does feel it's probably a little bit below what you might expect and hope for. But ultimately, I also can't bring myself to care about that too much. Halo Infinite isn't really all that focused on how it looks. 343 would have made a visual powerhouse Halo if they'd wanted, but it wouldn't have been a game with the scope and ambition that this has. Perhaps the polish in other areas, like the sublime balance of the polish, would have suffered if they'd done that, so I'm perfectly happy to take Infinite for what it is. Some of the clue of the nature of Infinite is in the name. The game's final chapters are not yet written. There's no co-op, of course, which is a major component of the Halo series, and much of this feels like a setup for an ongoing treadmill of content. There's plenty of game here, though. Completing the story and getting around 60% overall completion took me about 13 to 15 hours, and as a foundation for future updates, both single player and multiplayer, they don't come much better than this. Halo Infinite isn't perfect. It has foibles and struggles here and there, but it's also a slam dunk of a release. It is exactly what Halo needs to be right now. As Halo's relevance has felt to wane over recent years, this is a bold statement that no, Halo isn't over. Halo is relevant as ever. It was never close to being over. And I don't mind waiting to see where updates take the rest of this game, because what's here at launch is already largely brilliant. I think the best thing I can say about Infinite is I'm excited for the future of Halo again. And that is, I guess, my first impressions. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, we'll have plenty more about Halo Infinite on VG247.com, so don't forget to visit the site. You can, of course, give us a like, give us a subscribe, ring the bell, and that will mean you'll be the first to see anything else we put out on Halo Infinite. I think Durrani's going to be back with some sweet multiplayer stuff because he's got far more sick multiplayer skills than I have in Halo. So he's going to be putting together some pretty rad, highlight reels and stuff like that. So if you want more Halo, stick with us. We're also going to have more stuff towards the end of the year and all the big releases for the rest of this year and next year. But yeah, those are my impressions. There's a full written review on the website if you want to go and read it, VG247.com. But that is it from me for now. So until next time, everyone, see ya.